In Los Angeles, Mr. Popper's Penguins has a new billboard for the weekend that says, "For Father's Day, take Pops to see Poppers." Well, I have a slightly different tagline. For Father's Day, if you want your dad to think you're a dick, take Pops to see Poppers.
Word.
Hey everybody, welcome back to Sticky Floor Friday, the internet movie show coming to you from a back alley somewhere. No, actually, I am in New York this week, as evidenced by my rear window-esque view out here in New York. So, because of that, I'm going to keep this relatively short, but I just saw Green Lantern, and I want to give you my thoughts on it. A little background. I'm not that familiar with Green Lantern's story. I don't read a lot of his comics, but, you know, I know the basic idea. And when I was a kid, I had one of the rings and all that stuff, but I was never a huge fan, so I'm coming in relatively fresh. Now, Green Lantern is getting shellacked by the critics. It is like a 25% on Rotten Tomatoes, and while I'm not entirely going to share in their bloodlust, I will say it's not a great movie, it's not even really a good movie, but it's also not a terrible movie. It's not something that's so embarrassing that's like Catwoman status. It's just half-hearted. That's the best way I can describe this movie. It is half-hearted. It hits all the obligatory points of the origin story that are necessary. We establish the character's weaknesses, which also happen to be his charm. He discovers his powers. He learns how to use the powers. He debuts the powers in front of the world. Then he uses those powers to save that world and learn more about himself. But everything really just feels like it's going through the motions. Even his constructs, the objects he can create with his imagination, are half-hearted.
The sword of human.
And they even acknowledge that in the movie, thinking that's going to let them off the hook. But it does not. All it does is point out that they are not being creative enough and saying, we know. Sorry. And Ryan Reynolds' personality is toned down here. He cracks wise, but it just doesn't have any bite to it. And a lot of that has to do with the writing. There's some really atrocious dialogue. He gives it his earnest best, but there's just nothing there for him to sink his teeth into. Even his small role as Deadpool was more sarcastic, had more life to it than what he brings to the table here. Meanwhile, the characters and their motivations are all over the place. I like the idea of parallax, which is basically a fear-eating glob of poo, but they don't go far enough with the idea of fear. It's basically just like, look at me, be scared of my poo-shaped visage. And then he sucks in their souls. There's a weird, tenuous connection between the Parallax and Peter Sarsgaard's character, Hector Hammond. Sarsgaard is fun in the role, but he's so overshadowed by Parallax, who is just like all-powerful, that his character is basically rendered useless. There's also a throwaway role for Tim Robbins, which happens to be in every single comic book movie, and he's stuck in one gear, and that gear is politician-y, I guess. Also, Blake Lively is a fighter pilot, and we're supposed to believe that, I guess? Okay. And the other Green Lanterns seem pretty useless. It's like they introduced all these other 3,000-some Green Lanterns, and then they decide, hey, you know what, we're just going to take a handful to go take care of this Parallax guy. We got this. And the rest of them just stand around on this planet, holding their rings in the air. It's a setup for a sequel, and I really hate that, because I'm sitting in the theater now watching this movie. Green Lantern is not as terrible as you may have heard, but it's still not a very good movie. Honestly, if you haven't seen X-Men First Class or Super 8, go see those first, because they are far superior and much more entertaining. Green Lantern is just very middle of the road. It's very Thor. It's just very Thor.